Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists absolutely got it correct. And this is Tom Navolis, your host, and I am delighted that you are here with me again today as we're in the middle of a lot of transitional things here at Samuel Adams in our studios and just all the good things that we go through in life. And we're going to talk a little bit about the bad things that we go through in life, because a lot of times we tie those to either personal things that are going on, we tie them to the political arena, we tie them to the social arena, as well as to the economy. Well, today's program, what I'm going to be talking about is aborting moral truth for lunacy. I'm sure that every time that you take a few minutes and go to your, I hope, more reserved, conservative form of media, that when you ascertain what is going on, you clearly determine that there is a lot of lunacy happening. But how do you recognize it? How do you know that it's there? I don't want to get into the deep philosophical aspects, but if you go to samueladamsreturns.net and you look at the blog post for today's program, you'll be able to read in there that I open up that someone that I know, a colleague at Hillsdale College, this person in his PhD program, and he refreshed my mind, or he caused me to go refresh my readings that I did years ago on Rousseau and Kant. Now, there are a couple of philosophers from the same period of time as America was being founded. A lot of people don't or haven't gone in and studied these two individuals. But what I wanted to do today is just make that initial comment that the roots that they planted there in the 1700s have grown into these massive trees that aren't the carbon munchers that last week's guest George talked about on the tree-hugging capitalist. No, these trees don't munch carbon and make good things like oxygen out of it. You see, the trees of Rousseau and Kant have produced rotten fruit. They've grown, they've flourished. They become the Marxists, the progressives, the liberals, the abortionists, the people that are in pulpits that teach poor theology and bad theology and wrong theology. Well, in addition to having to take and look at what's there, and again, go to samueladamsreturns.net to take and read what I have in my opening statement, I am also reading a book, which is a surprise for me. I've known of this gentleman for a long period of time and bits and pieces, but it's been a very interesting read by G.K. Chesterton. And G.K. Chesterton, he was a very interesting man, very strong Roman Catholic, and what he brings to bear in here that I think is touching on the ideas of lunacy, as he was walking with a publisher one day, and I'm not going to read everything in here, but they got talking about apparently something that they saw on a bus go by in relationship to one of the insane asylums at that time. You got to remember, this was back in the 1800s. And the gentleman that was walking with him was saying, that you don't know, but I'm going to tell you that there's a lot of men there that, if someone believes in himself, he won't go there. Now, that's something that's happening now inside of our school systems, is teachers are saying the only one that you can believe in is yourself. Chesterton comes back and he says, let me tell you about the people that believed in themselves. He goes on, he talks about Napoleon, he talks about Caesar. He knows a number of them that are fixed stars of certainty and success. And I can guide you to the thrones of the supermen. The men who really believe in themselves are all in lunatic asylums. I stopped with that, and I had to say, as we're seeing all of the moral degradation, and we're seeing that children are being questioned or told, you decide whether you're a boy or girl. Don't look between your legs to determine that. Don't look in a mirror to determine that. You decide. Well, you see, that's what Immanuel Kant was all about, was that when you take and you look at the moral determination in what is going on, ultimately, Kant talks about this categorical imperative. And what that means is that none other than the law of an autonomous will, a total will outside of the ideas of God, except what morality society is determining at the moment. And then you are supposed to do that moral duty, whether it is something you believe in or not. It's like you got all these people that are running around and getting jabs because they think that's their moral duty to do that. That's wrong. That is immoral. Anyway, one of the other things that in this first section, I thought I was going to get a lot more. That Chesterton talks about in here, just one more thing that I think is really good to hang on to as it sets the stage for the rest of today's program, is that there is a lot of the ministers at that time that did not believe in original sin. And in fact, there were pastors there in England, in London in particular, that didn't believe in sin at all. And that Chesterton says all you got to do is take a look at the streets and see what's going on around you and know there is sin. There is that direct revelation of God, and there is anybody that looks at the Ten Commandments understands what the basic sins are for humanity. Oh, well, now he's talking about Rousseau. Rousseau didn't believe in original sin, so we're not all sinners, but the Bible is very clear that we are, and that's why we need the Savior Jesus, not some morality that is contrived in the minds of men. So all of what Chesterton was talking about and looking at that moral context and looking at lunacy is that those people that so well believe in themselves and what we're pushing our kids to are making them mentally ill. I don't have time to go into that today, but we will, even more so. So what I wanted to touch on in respect to that is, in this first segment, and try and close it up in the next few minutes, is you take that to its largest next conclusion, and we look at the elections here in Ohio. Now, in many ways, they were a debacle. And one of the aspects of it that you have to be clear on, and it may be true in your state as well, is what's called open primaries. Open primaries means that you can take and you can be a Democrat, but you can pull a Republican ballot and vote as a Republican, or vice versa. So when we look just in my county, in Geauga County, I think there was 67,000. Don't get me exact on this. I may have it up in the video for you. There were like 67,000 eligible voters. Only 20-some thousand people voted. Okay? Interesting. only 3,000 Democrats voted. The remainder voted as Republicans. Now, the interesting thing in our county is that in the couple of newspapers, rags here, and I call them that, the Maple D Leaf in particular, people took out full-page ads telling Democrats to cross over and vote as Republicans. And not only that, the chairman of the Republican Party was not specific to Democrats, but inferred in an email as well as in a flyer that was sent out that, you know what, everybody should vote as a Republican. So no wonder we can see what happened in the primary elections in Ohio, where Governor DeSwine was again at the top of the ticket for the November election, and we saw other candidates in the senatorial race that bubbled up and pushed down, other candidates. This is a debacle. Now, worse, and let me tell you right now, is that part of this and what I wanted to cover is that President Trump has done some real interesting things. And and many people know that I've had real heartburn with him coming in and taking and not only stumping for J.D. Vance, who has never gone out until recently, until Trump endorsed him, did he go out and campaign. This guy was like Joe Biden hiding someplace. So he never campaigned until Trump stumped for him at a rally. And then Junior went with him to different places. Sadly, what really is irritating, the reason Governor DeSwine, not only because of the crossover votes, ended up back on the ticket, because DeSwine is actually a Democrat and he's a tyrant here in Ohio. And what happened was that Jim Renacci, because he stood up to President Trump and told him that he did not believe that J.D. Vance was the right person for Ohio, Trump refused to endorse him when 2 weeks earlier, I know personally that Trump was going to endorse Jim Renacci. But because Jim Renacci said, no, I don't think really that J.D. is the right guy and I'm not going to take and, tag my name to him, that is another reason why we have DeSwine now on the ballot. Now, with that, you have to understand, where is moral continuity? Where is it that the Constitution of Ohio and the Constitution of the United States matters? My question in all of this is, as we move into the next segments, is going to be around abortion, slavery, liberty, and quite frankly, we do not have those people, including the Trump America First agenda, that truly understands constitutionality. Look at who the candidates are. Do they understand the truths and principles under which they should govern? For the most part, the answer is no. They understand these fancy parameters, but when they get into office, they're going to be surrounded by the establishment within the context of the place that they will go if they get elected to those offices, and they're going to operate under a bunch of set of rules and forget what it means that there even is a Constitution. Sam Adams said when the Constitution came into being that, you decided for this form of government. Now live under it. Live under it. Act according to it. But we've had elected for over a century and a half that have not. So come on back in the next segment when we talk about what is the abortion, slavery, and the true meaning of liberty. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those Anti-Federalists got it right. And this is Tom Nivolis, your host. And we are going to continue to talk about lunacy in so many different ways. And one of the ones that is really, I mean, you could see it, you can assess it in any way you want, is about Uncle Joe Biden. Uncle Joe Biden is operating based on what we talked about in that first segment in relationship to the lunacy as Chesterton describes it. And one of the areas that really sets him apart in that is his comments here about abortion in relationship to the Supreme Court's leak of a potential decision that they're going to make on Roe versus Wade. Now, what you have to understand is that Biden just flagrantly tosses out these ideas of, oh yeah, this is in the Constitution, that's in the Constitution. There is no enumerated right whatsoever in the Constitution about abortion. There is no right constituted around gender. There is no right constituted around the homosexuality. I mean, none of that. There's no rights around education. There's no rights around housing. Now, as you know, to that which I spoke of in relationship to Franklin Roosevelt a few weeks ago, I read in all of the new rights that Roosevelt believes are there. And I will put a link to it. And in the video, I'm probably going to pause in the video right here, and I'm going to interject his speech, his video, his movie that they took of him taking and declaring all these new rights.
President Roosevelt was too sick to go up to the Capitol and give his annual State of the Union address.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
It has been my custom to deliver these annual messages in person.
So he gave it from the White House over the radio. When it was over, he asked the newsreel cameras to step into his room because he wanted the American people to see one particular part of his speech. The President of the United States then took the radical step of proposing a second Bill of Rights to the Constitution.
In our day, certain economic truths have become accepted as self-evident. A second Bill of Rights, under which a new basis of security and prosperity can be established for all, regardless of station or race or creed. Among these are the right to a useful and remunerative job, the right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation, the right of every farmer to raise and sell his products at a return which will give him and his family a decent living, the right of every businessman, large and small, to trade in an atmosphere of freedom, freedom from unfair competition and domination by monopolies at home or abroad, the right of every family to a decent home, the right to adequate medical care and the opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health, the right to adequate protection from the economic fears of old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment, the right to a good education. All of these rights spell security. And after this war is won, we must be prepared to move forward in the implementation of these rights to new goals of human happiness and well-being. For unless there is security here at home, there cannot be lasting peace in the world.
which is what the left, the socialists, the progressives, the communists put into place and are assumed to be right, but they're not in the Constitution, not anywhere. And you can't, and this is the fallacy of not looking at original intent, because you can't even extract that out of the 9th Amendment, and you cannot extract it out of the 14th, is where they have been doing it. Now, when we look at this, Joe Biden is full of himself. He's full of himself. So, right now, we have to say that he's led to the point of lunacy. Now, there's something else that I did want to read for you in a relationship to that, because I'm sitting here going, what does the Bible have to say about madness? And, quite frankly, that's lunacy. So one of the places I wanted to look here is that here's Zechariah 12:4. On that day, declares the Lord, I will strike every horse with panic and its rider with madness. But for the sake of the house of Judah, I will keep my eyes open when I strike every horse of the peoples with blindness. Interesting. Here's an interesting one, too, is that in Deuteronomy 28, the Lord will strike you with madness and blindness and confusion of mind. Whoa. Wait a minute. So when we start looking at all these different perversions and we start looking at all the evils that are in front of us, guess what? People even vote the way they vote because they don't take time to learn anything about candidates, because then they're dumb, and then they accept the sins, the total anti-godness in society. Okay, God goes, guess what? But was rebuked for his own transgression. A speechless donkey spoke with human voice and restrained the prophet's madness. That was 2 Peter 2:16. So, sometimes I feel like a dumbass taking and talking to people out there, but I'm not seeing where it's restraining anybody's madness. We got a world gone mad when you look at the Supreme Court steps and everything that's going on there. The battle lines having to be drawn, and you have all of these radicals that are out there that are just filled with the self-indulging sins and desire for the blood of the innocent, all the way to the time that after they're born. I have a link in there for Connecticut, and they're welcoming everybody in. They're becoming one of those sanctuary states for abortion, and we're seeing there that others are allowing abortion out birth. It's not even abortion, it's infanticide. And you have to remember that God judged infanticide very, very deeply. Out of John 10:20, many of them said he has a demon and is insane. Why listen to him? They're talking about Christ in that regard. So you're looking at those types of things. The whole verse on Deuteronomy 28 through 34, it's longer. But you know what? I got to read it to you. I wasn't going to do it, but I just feel impressed that I need to read this, because go to the reference, and I'm going to put it up for you to see while I read it on the video. So if you're just listening on the radio, I'm thankful that you're there, or the blog, but go see the video, because here's what it says. The Lord will strike you with madness and blindness and confusion of mind, and you shall grope at noonday as the blind grope in darkness, and you shall not prosper in your ways, and you shall be only oppressed and robbed continually, and there shall be no one to help you. You shall betroth a wife, but another man shall ravish her. You shall build a house, but you shall not dwell in it. You shall plant a vineyard, but you shall not enjoy its fruit. Your ox shall be slaughtered before your eyes, but you shall not eat any of it. Your donkey will be seized before your face, but shall not be restored to you. Your sheep shall be given to your enemies, but there shall be no one to help you. Your sons and your daughters shall be given to another people, while your eyes look on and fail, and longing for them all the day, but you shall be helpless. Folks, I look at that as to what's happened in modern society based on all that we, especially Christians, have allowed to happen, is that just start putting it into context. And I look at the educational system as that last portion, that last verse there. Your sons and daughters shall be given to another, while your eyes look on and fail with longing for them all the day, and you're going to be helpless. Well, that's even more so of what's being grabbed on in the educational system. So go to the references at samueladamsreturns.net, and you will see that I have more verses there that I think are extremely interesting to look at in the context of insanity and madness, and that, if nothing else, understand that Rousseau and Kant, in what they did and planted those roots, the trees have grown and blossomed and the flowers look so pretty, but their aroma was a stench and their fruit rotten to the core. So when you don't understand even original sin that came from Adam and Eve, and then you're blind when you look around, even on the streets, and you see all that is there before you, and you ignore it. Wow. Oh, wow. Not much more that I can say about that, but just a comment on slavery. There's a lot in there in relationship to Sam Adams' life and public service. Sam Adams was always against slavery. In fact, as noted here from Volume 1, is that this Mrs. Avery stated that when she was 8 or 10 years old, about 1764, 1766, a female slave called Surrey was given to her aunt, Mrs. Adams, and that on her returning home and mentioning the gift to her husband, that being Sam Adams, he said to her immediately, "A slave cannot live in my house. If she comes, she must be free." He accordingly liberated her on going into his family, where she lived many years and where she died in the midst of kind ministrations both to her body and her soul. Sam Adams, when it was time for the constitutional conventions in the state, proposed an amendment to the Constitution to end slavery in America in 1808, and everybody was against him. Yes, there was slavery here, but it came from England. And you have to remember, and my big retort is to these people and women that are arguing that the founders were nothing but a bunch of misogynists and they were just slave holders and owners and evil and all of that. Well, how did the economy work? What was going on between the North and the South? And you have to remember that for the most part, Massachusetts and the northern colonies were anti-slavery, and they had free people, no matter what the color of their skin, living there in those colonies. Slavery is that which we have today. Slavery, I wish all of these people running their mouths off about the past would go deal with the present in Western Africa, North Africa, the Middle East, Afghanistan, where slavery is an active activity. How about the slavery coming across the Mexican-American border? What about that? You know, the Democrats don't care about that. They don't scream about all the human trafficking. You see, that's slavery. Human trafficking is slavery. And just about every one of those illegals coming across our border are slaves because they had to pay the people that are running them up, showing them how to get across. Now, don't talk to me about trying to use this idea of going back to slavery by getting rid of abortion. Quite frankly, I'll leave you with this in this last minute and a half, is that even Christians do not understand states' rights. You don't understand your constitution in your state, nor do you understand the federal constitution or the idea of federalism. Because Connecticut, California, Massachusetts, they can be places for abortion. Mississippi, Ohio, other states that are saying no to abortion, North Dakota, Florida, all of the other states have a state's right to say no to abortion. Amazon is now going to take and pay any of their employees that want to fly to another state to get an abortion. That's a whole nother topic. Maybe we'll pick it up in the third segment a little bit or not. But you see, these are the items that, in particular, Sam Adams was against. His ideas of liberty we're going to talk about in the third segment as we come back because, yep, he got it right, and so did those anti-federalists. Talk to you in a couple. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this third segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they predictively had it absolutely correct. This is Tom Navolis, your host. Once again, I would ask that you would go to samueladamsreturns.net for everyone that's listening to this on the radio and pick up the second segment there at the full blog posting where you can hear all three segments of the program. And I would ask that if you have a capacity, that you would look there at the website or for the donate button, or sign up for the newsletter in particular. I only send them out pretty much only once a week, unless something hot comes up that I want to talk about. Or if I'm doing one of the sermons from the founding era, or if I'm finishing more chapters on J.T. Headley's book, The Clergy and Chaplains, or the Chaplains and Clergy of the Revolution, then I'll send something out to let you know about that. And usually on that newsletter at the bottom, there's a little button you can push to help keep this program going, especially out there in the St. Louis market. So with that, I want you to go back and review that second segment as I talked not only about slavery, but I talked about a couple other issues deeper in there about the abortion insanity that is going on. And I want to pick back up real quick in that it's all lunacy in so many different ways. The book that I quoted from at the beginning is the G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy. I highly recommend that you read that and don't get offended. Learn something. Learn something. I think he has a lot of valuable words to say. He even talks in here about the suicide of thought. You see, that's what's going on. Instead of the suicide of thought, there's many people that are Christians, that are even politicians, that are, you know what, committing hara-kiri of thought because they don't want to engage in the realities of life. They prefer to stay within the context of the frivolity of things, which Sam Adams had a real hard time with when it came to what his friend Mr. Hutchinson, actually Hutchinson was not his friend. See what happens when you do Samuel Adams too much? You turn out to be like 300 years old. Anyway, the idea is that Sam Adams did not go for frivolity, but he wanted people to understand the truths so that they would not take and commit suicide with their thoughts. But what we have now, especially with the Biden administration, is the murder of thought, the murder of what it means to be able to have free speech. So with that, let me jump on into a little bit more here in relationship to what is true liberty. I mentioned in the last segment that I was going to talk about liberty from Sam Adams' perspective. I do want to read this to you because it's very clear and it establishes the fundamental that we should understand in what liberty is and how do we take and live it or find it. Because we don't have true liberty in America any longer. Number one, most people I talk to, and you may be someone that I haven't talked to, but I will put you in this category. You don't know what true liberty is. You don't know what it is, especially the younger generations. Sam writes this, and he was writing this in The Rights of the Colonist. And he says, as it respects individuals, a man is free when he freely enjoys the security of the laws and the rights to which he is born. When he is hindered by no violence from claiming those rights and enjoying that security, but may at any time demand the protection of the laws under which he lives and be sure when demanded to enjoy it. This is what it takes to be liberty. And consider in this light all the fine things said of it by ancient and modern do justly belong to it. O libertaris, freedom, de certe, goodness for sure. It is the choicest gift that heaven has lent to man, an emanation from the Father of lights, an image and representation of the government of the supreme director of all things, which, though it can never be controlled by any superior force, is yet even guided by the laws of infinite wisdom. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to start there. If you're not hearing and understanding, and okay, let me take a stop for a second. You have to remember that Sam Adams was a Reformation, biblically sound, Puritan believer in the Most High God. Period. That is him. Otherwise, he could not make the statements he did. Otherwise, he could not be able to profess liberty as he did here. That it's a gift from heaven lent to us. It's on loan, no different than the earth, as we talked about last week, is the idea that we are the stewards of all things, including that gift of liberty that is given from the Father and that is secured in Jesus Christ. I love that one that Paul talks about, and just clarifying for us that there's no liberty except in Christ. When we look at what Chesterton was talking about in that of lunacy, when all you can do is reason your lies, reason your stories, reason why it's okay for boys and girls to determine who and what they are outside of their created order that God has given, goodness, that's lunacy. When you take and you look at homelessness to the extent that it is, when you look at socialism, communism, and all the things that are being foisted on us by political, not ineptness, by the designing men and women that are perverse within the context of themselves, because they are the ones that have so much self-confidence in themselves. They're lunatics. That's lunacy. Go read a little bit more of Chesterton to get a little bit more concept on that, but I have to take you back to right here at the beginning. Sam Adams is talking about how we should enjoy our liberty, not have everything oppressed on us and call us free. That's not freedom. That's not liberty. And the laws are supposed to be just laws in relationship to the justice that God gives us in what is freedom. You can't have it any other way. It has to be guided by His infinite wisdom. But alas, in this exalted sense, liberty is rather admired in the world than truly enjoyed. Oh, how true it is here. What multitudes of persons are there who have not so much as a shadow of it, who hold their property and even their lives by no other tenure than the sovereign will of a tyrant. In Ohio, we're getting one back under Governor DeWine. And he often the worst and most detestable of men who, to gratify the least humor or passion in his nature, does not scruple to massacre them by thousands. Go get the jab. Sure, it is true what Orthodox divines tell us, that men are apostate from God, since in his righteous providence he subjects so many of them to so much such miserable fate. Now see, Sam Adams got it right. His contemporaries over there in Europe, when you had Rousseau and Kant, got it wrong. He just said here, the Orthodox divines tell us that men are apostate from God. That means we're sinful before God. Okay? Wow. And we have this miserable fate, as I was reading in the second segment from Scripture, as to the madness that God allows and even puts on us for our sins. Sam got it right. But there are other states and civil societies in the world, the model of whose government seems to promise the sure enjoyment of this blessing, which yet, if we attentively examine, we shall find to be really destitute of it, destitute of liberty. We shall often find that where the forms of it are observed, the substance of it is wanting. Look at all of Europe right now. For as that man is truly a slave who, though impelled by no external violence, is yet carried away by the impetuosity of his passions to do those things which are abhorrent from his nature and his reason. Hello, Kant. There is a contrary statement right there to what Kant was teaching at the very same time in America. I mean, over in Europe. Sorry about that. So neither can the people be called free who, though they make their own laws, are yet blinded by the prejudice and are diverted by undue influence from uniformly pursuing their own interest. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that again is both Rousseau and Kant, is those that are pursuing their own interest. I talked about that in the opening segment. So what is it, Tom? What are we supposed to be doing right now? What is it that we have to do when we look at the political situations that we are in, that you, Tom, are in Ohio? We're now having, not just the swine that's going to bubble up into the governor's race again, but you have this J.D. Vance guy that nobody knows about except for the fact that Trump endorsed him. And others are saying, oh, he's really a good guy. Really? How is he good? What is that goodness? What does it mean? Where's his moral character? What is the very essence of what he believes from a constitutional perspective? Where is it that you go back and you look at what Sam Adams was talking about in liberty that matters? Where is it that it is constitutionally sound? Oh, wait a minute. Let me ask that questions of you and yourself. Where is it that you understand constitutionalism within the context and framework of your own state constitution, and that which it all fits together in the puzzle of the federal constitution? Or do you take and you just blindly, which I've talked to a number of people and have seen, that they voted for J.D. Vance because they did not reason for themselves. They did not investigate for themselves. Well, Trump endorsed him, so we just voted for him blindly. So there it is in this last paragraph that I read, and you can find at samueladamsreturns.net, and you can read it for yourself there under the third segment portion of the outline. It's very simple. It's just the blind. There's this semblance of this idea of liberty, and yet now in America, we only have an idea of it. We don't know what it really is or what it was intended to be that Sam Adams talked about. And where for you, I hope that not only do you know that liberty in Christ, but you take and you understand and you learn what it means to live and act in it. It's not just spiritual liberty. It's liberty to be the steward within the context of what the Anti-Federalist and Sam Adams talked about. Come on back next week.